Hello again, and welcome to Winning with the Wrangler at Dick Powell's Leadership Corner, brought to you by Earth, Wind, Fire, Water Training and Development, where our passion is building leaders of today and tomorrow. Leaders, the information on today's program was gathered from many different places and many different people. So if you hear yourself in our conversation today, please remember, it is not all about you. Today's message is going to be, well, I believe it'll be something new for you. You see, well, like all of us, from time to time I have to clean my office. If you were to not look behind that big screen in the back, you would see some bookshelves, you would see stacks of papers, you would see everything in my office, and some said, well, gee, we would like to see it. And some said, oh no, please not. But something spectacular happened today, and I'm going to share it with you. You see, while I was cleaning, I found in the corner, stuck way back in the corner, a fencing foil. And this fencing foil I picked up at an auction. It was something that I've always wanted to have, and when I got it, I didn't realize just how important it was. It was made in Spain, and it had Spanish steel and this gauntlet type opportunity. But as I looked at it, something went off in my mind. Well, some people say that happens all too often. But really, it started to really percolate. And when I started to sit and look at it, I started to think about this. You see, that foil sat in the corner. And like leadership, from time to time, we let it sit in the corner. You see, when I picked up that foil, the hand grip fit my hand like I couldn't believe, like a long lost friend, and it felt so right. But leadership can't just be put in the corner. It's got to be used daily. To become a good person fencing, you have to practice all the time, not just a little bit. It's all in the legs, it's in the arm, it's in the wrist. And boy, I'll tell you what, your ankles will hurt when you first start. But I put it up in my hand, and the grip, well, my grip snuggled behind the bell guard. You know, the bell guard, it was like that. It was formed right around my own wrist. And when I knew for a fact that this was an antique and it was many years old and it had not been made for me, but it sure felt that way. I looked down and I looked down the blade, and I'm always amazed. The blade starts out at just about a half an inch by half an inch, all the way through the grip, the pommel, and goes down to an eighth of an inch square. The blade is square on this, and it's tapered down. And as I looked down, I saw that it was still, after all these years, straight and true. That Spanish steel, I realized had been tempered just right to be resilient, that it would actually bend to a certain amount and spring back into shape, all while remaining strong, no matter how many times that the smashing blows were landed on that steel. Now, if you kind of remember anything at all, you know that when I look at things, I pull them all into a leadership thought process. Sometimes that really gets me in trouble. But I look at things and I think to myself, how was it made? Who made it? What went into it? All the different parts and pieces, but the time, the talent, the imagination, the curiosity, everything went into it. And quite frankly, that's what leadership is all about. So when I really started picking this up, give me a second. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. Can you see this? That's the pommel. and that's the long blade. It's quite a bit bigger than you thought it is, isn't it? Now, the reason I got so excited was I put that in my hand, and when I put it in my hand, I knew that's what the balance, the steel, everything about it. The end, the pommel, actually has a weight on it that is so that it will balance correctly in your hand. Now, when I thought about that, and I really started putting things in it, leadership is something that cannot be forgotten. You see, leadership happens daily, not in a day. It must be used consistently to ensure personal growth. And that's the part that becomes really hard, isn't it? Personal growth as to when and how to put it into place, when to use it. Just like the foil, when should it be used and when should it not be used? I look at this all the time and I think to myself, who practiced with it? Whose was it? There's many different blades that come to mind. You see, leadership cannot be forgotten. It will always be with you. It is one of the few things that cannot ever be taken away from you. It will always be yours. Leadership like this foil cannot be stuck back in the corner and left. Left alone, it must be used. And it must be used on a consistent daily basis. And that, my friends, is harder than it seems. Now I'm going to start practicing with this again, and I know that the first few days I'm going to be in pain because I haven't kept up and I wasn't consistent in my practicing. And Miss Robin will probably remind me just how out of shape I am. Now, like this foil, leadership is weighty. You see, leadership brings along accountability. The weight, well, that's because people will always be watching you and holding you to a high standard. Leaders, no matter where you're at in the corporation, the organization, the church, the family, no matter where you're at, you're always going to be held to this. And people are always going to be watching. And so that weighty piece that can wait on you, you can do two things about it. One, you can keep up with it every single day and be consistent in all you do so the weight is fairly removed from your shoulders. Or like me, you can let it sit in the corner and it's going to cost you when you start up again. That weight is sometimes heavier than what we want to realize. Now, this next one, I have to tell you that when I picked the foil up, and I felt the balance. And great leaders are balanced. You see, the body, mind, soul, heart, all those different parts and pieces of being a great leader, there'll be times when they get out of balance. Sometimes you'll put too much time into the career, not enough time in your personal life. And there'll be other times when it gets reversed, and then there'll be times when, it just seems to come together. I don't think any of us can have a perfect balance between our work life and our home life. But I do believe we can balance those other things like good mental health, like good physical health. You see, our good career health. I believe we can start balancing those things. Good personal health. I believe we can start balancing them. And when we start doing that, it'll start really changing the way that we're looked at and we're respected and we're held accountable. I think that that's the biggest piece for me when I looked at the word balanced. You see, balance is all about always learning, always listening, always gathering more knowledge. And then that will enable you to reach good solutions and be able to practice this daily. It'll become second nature. It'll become what I've always done instead of what I started to do. And that is where we really start our growth pattern. So think about that just a little bit. That this thing of leadership, well, it cannot be forgotten. It is weighty. And we put that on ourselves. It needs to be balanced. Now, I told you about looking down the blade of this antique foil. And I told you it was straight and true. And so I wrote down that leadership needs to be straight. I think this is the hardest part for us sometimes, is being straight and true. You see, straight means this. As leaders, we need to stand up straight, walk straight, be morally straight. We need to look at every decision we make through our vision and our mission to ensure that we're living out our opportunities. Being straight means to walk the talk of being a leader. It means you can't say one thing and do something else. You've got to really be real. Okay? Do what's right because, well, for the right reasons. And then you're going to have to stand straight behind your decisions. Now, look, life happens. And if you make a mistake or error in judgment, which will happen, acknowledge it quickly. Ask for forgiveness. Seek a solution. Learn from the opportunity. And ask yourself, what would I do different? And what did I learn from this? And once you've answered those questions, move on. Use this as a learning tool, not something to beat yourself up with, but something to learn from. You know, life is going to happen. You will make mistakes. You will make a bad judgment call from, well, time to time. Well, heck, even I do it once a day. Think about what you're doing all the time. So far, we've talked about leadership needs to be not forgotten. Leadership is weighty. Leadership needs to be balanced. Leadership is straight. This next one is kind of the same, but different. Leadership needs to be true. You see, great leaders are true to themselves first and to everyone else next. When people trust in you to be truthful, that's when integrity and character are grown. And those are two things that as leaders we must have. You see, if without our integrity, without our character, we won't be leaders very much or very long. My good friend John Maxwell always says charisma will get you through the door, but it won't keep you there. For without the leadership ability to have character and integrity, people find out very quickly that straight and true is not you. Well, I just made that up. That sounded pretty good, didn't it? As I looked at the blade, I realized that it was tempered. And we as leaders, we become tempered by living through the trials of life. We become tempered as we mature, at the point of really ingraining the opportunity of being proactive instead of reactive. We're tempered to the point where when things happen, we're able to take a breath, find out all information, do the research, get prepared before we make a decision. There will be times when you need to make a quick decision, when you hopefully have all the information to do so. There again, this is something that comes with time. Now, leaders, I'm going to say this, and hopefully it doesn't hurt your feelings. Being tempered doesn't come with age sometimes. I've seen some who are much younger than myself who have learned this long before I did. This thing of stopping and taking a breath, gathering all the information before a decision was made. But that being tempered to a situation. You see, when they temper steel, they heat it red hot. And after they heat it red hot, they dip it into oil to cool it. And this puts the temper into it. It makes it so it's almost, well, bendable, but not. It does have a breaking point. And when you're learning to be tempered in all your decisions, there sometimes are times when you need to get to that breaking point. But other times, you're going to find yourself moving through, gathering information before you make decisions. Now, as I looked at that steel in this foil, I really learned that it was strong. Spanish steel, I'm told, is some of the strongest anywhere, especially when this foil was made. Well, they're telling me that it's from the late 40s, early 50s. That's a long time ago. And they made steel totally different back then, just so you know. But leaders must be strong enough to stand for what is right, and strong enough to admit when they're wrong. You understand what I'm saying? Leaders must be strong enough to stand for what is right, and strong enough to admit when they're wrong, when they've made a mistake, when they made an error, when they need to change. I've always said that great leaders have some things in common. When the word strong comes up, they're strong in body. They're ones who are taking care of themselves. They're working out. They're going for walks. They're eating correctly. They're sleeping correctly. They're doing things to take care of their body. But they're also strong of mind. And that means they're always feeding their mind, that ongoing continuous learning piece that keeps them strong and in charge. I met a man just the other day who was in his late 90s. And I asked him one time, I said, Bob, how is it that your mind is so sharp? And he told me that even in his late 90s, he's reading one book a week. And I said, well, by this time, you must have read all the books in the library. And he started laughing. He said, no, he says, what I do is, he says, I get one book that I call a good for me book, something I'm going to learn from. And I read that one week. And the next week, I pull out one of my old Westerns because that's what I really love. I said, well, I do too. Have you ever read this? We compared notes on which Western we were reading at the time. That is huge. Now, I noticed Bob was also fairly physically fit for a man in his late 90s. And I asked him, how does he do that? He said, well, can't dance too much anymore. He said, but the halls where I live here are a couple 100 feet long. And so I get up first thing in the morning, I get dressed, and I walk the hall 3 times. Then I go back and shower, and I get dressed for the day. He said, then late in the evening, before I get ready to go to bed, I'll walk the halls 3 times again. And he said, in between, I'll take and do some arm exercises and whatnot. He says, because you need to keep physically strong. And then he said to me, Dick, I want you to add something else to this paper you're writing. And I said, what's that? He says, you need to have strong soul. You need to know who you are inside as well as outside. And he said, strong is more than just having muscles. Strong is really being able to do what's right because it's the right thing to do, and then standing behind it because it's the right thing to do. And he said, Dick, this will not always make you a popular person. From time to time, you'll need to stand up for something that's right, and you won't be popular. The difference is you'll know in your heart and your soul that you're doing the right thing. It kind of took me back a moment, but then I picked up the foil again, and him and I were talking about it. And he said, the biggest thing about that foil is how resilient it is. Not its age, but how resilient. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, think how many times that steel has clashed upon steel on that foil. And when you look at it, there's no nicks, there's no abrasions, there's no cuts. It looks really, probably, if you sanded it down and took care of it and oiled it like you should, it looked brand new. I said, yeah, I've actually done that, and I don't see any of those things on there. He said, did I ever tell you the story about Marv? And I said, well, yes, many years ago when you were teaching me in my Boy Scouts. And he said, okay, do you remember what it is? I said, yeah, MARF, M-A-R-F, stands for maintain absolute rigid flexibility. And he went on to spend another 10 minutes telling me about rigid flexibility and how resilient you need to be. Doesn't mean you're always going to bend over backwards and those kind of things. But it does mean that if you get slapped down or you get put down or something doesn't work out, you're going to need to get back up. Be resilient. And so when I passed this whole thing to him, and I asked him to read it, and he kind of giggled at me because he knows how I look at things. He said, so what you're saying is leadership must never be forgotten. It must always be on your mind. It must always be within your soul. It must be how you live your life. You can never be shoved in the corner. Leadership, personal leadership, must come first. It's a true statement that you can't lead anyone else unless you can lead yourself. So I looked at him, I said, yes. And he said, then you've got on your list here that leadership is weighty, that it is something that can either weigh you down and sink you, or it's something that you can learn to really enjoy without that weight. I said, tell me more about that. And he said, look, if leadership is weighing you down, you need to talk to someone. You need to work with someone. You cannot do it all by yourself. If you're not delegating, if you're not helping other people help themselves get to where they want to go, you're not sharing knowledge, you're not really truly leading, it will become a weight on your shoulders that will be hard to buck off. He said the next thing you have on your list is balanced. And he says, I'm going to tell you what, from where I sit in my mid-90s, balanced home and balanced career are two different things. But if you think you can separate them, well, you need another thing coming. They will always go together. You see, an unbalanced home life makes an unbalanced work life. And when this starts to go the other way, unbalanced work life makes unbalanced home life, it starts to really grate on everyone. And that's when leadership becomes really weighty. It's when you get out of balance. He says, have you ever had a tire on your car that wasn't balanced correctly, and as you went down the road, it thump, 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 thump. And after a while, the tire just plain wore out. And of course, I have had that happen. And he said, that's what it's like to be unbalanced. You see, the rim is kind of like your center of your world, and the tire, the rubber on the outside, is all those different parts and pieces of your life. And when one side gets a bubble on it and gets out of balance, it's the one that causes you to take and put all of your energies towards it. And you find it very hard to put any of your energy anywhere else. That's what it means to be out of balance. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfectly balanced. It's just that's just not how life works. He said, but you're going to always need to think about it. Where in my leadership world am I really trying or doing my best to balance it all? He went on to many more things after that, but I'll never forget, he looked down and he took a moment and he said, your next two intrigue me. I said, Bob, what do you mean? He said, straight and true. He said, remember back a long time ago when you were in scouting, and we talked about being straight and true. I said, well, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't probably remember everything you said to me back then. But here's what he went on to tell me. He almost straight and true, word for what I had written down. Pretty amazing. Straight and true. Stand straight. Don't slouch. You're a leader. Stand up straight. Walk straight. Walk with a purpose. A lot of times the message you send will be sent long before you get to speak. And this stand straight and walk straight sends to the people that you can be trusted, that you have something important to relay, that you are the leader. He went on to say, Dick, you need to be morally straight. You need to know what your values are and what morals you go by. And you need to be able to take and really relate those to people. And he said, I remember when we repeat the 12 points of Scout Law every week, and I will bet you that that's the way you lived your life all these years. And I said, you are correct. He went on to say that standing straight, walking tall, you need to walk in the leadership shoes. That means you need to not only talk it, but walk it. So don't ever say something that you're not going to do. Don't ever do something you didn't say before. You see, people will always watch you, and people will always judge you. That's just the way life is. But if you're not doing what you say you are, they're going to call you on it pretty darn quick. And it makes you someone that's untrusted. And that's what this walking straight and true is all about. It's all about being true to yourself and building your character and integrity. Tempered, strong, resilient were the other ones that are on this list. I have to tell you that I'm going to keep this foil out here in front of me. I'm going to put it on the top of my desk so that I have to really look at it all the time. I'm going to do that for two reasons. One is I know that this exercise will be good for me. The other thing is I know that it's going to remind me be balanced, to be straight and true, to be resilient. All the things on here to really make sure that I'm doing and I'm living the leadership life. I'm going to encourage you to find your own thing that you're going to put on your desk, the only thing that you're going to look at all the time, to remind you that you're going to live the leadership life. Because quite frankly, there is no other. When we don't lead ourselves, we let someone else do it. Well, then we don't get to complain. But here's what I learned a long time ago. If you are not planning your life, someone else is and will. All right. I see I'm coming down to my last few minutes. I'm going to take and tell you this. On behalf of myself, Dick Powell, and the whole Leadership Corner team, I want to say thank you for being a part of today's program. Now, our hope is that you have received a nugget of wisdom and guidance that will help you become a better leader. Now, if you have any comments or, questions about today's program, hey, don't hesitate. I'm serious, don't hesitate. Give me a call, 727-422-1833, 727-422-1833. You can send me a text at that same number. You can send me an email, dick@ewfw.org, dick@ewfw.org. You can go to the website, www.ewfw.org. You can take and look all around. You can click on the button, send me a message there. And when you're ready to take and have me come and put on a leadership opportunity at your location, give me a call. Get on the list. We build up, we book up pretty darn quick for the year, but you can do it. I know you can. And until next time, DW the Wrangler saying, ride hard, ride fast.